probably the most quoted source in OER when it comes to not only to higher education but also to secondary education. So this is really big, but is mostly supported by a community and not by an institution. So our study also pointed out that this is mostly a grassroots movement. That means that at the time we ran our study, there were indeed only a few institutional initiatives, well known worldwide. And many of them, I would say, according to our data, more than 85% of them got their finance externally. So the problem of sustainability was raised already then. In most cases, even in those institutions which lacked an institutional project regarding OER, in fact, we found that there was a low level of institutional awareness. So when you talk in 2005 and 2006 to presidents of universities, rectors, vice-rectors, they hardly knew that someone in their university were running very interesting projects which received international attraction. So they hardly knew even the names of the people involved. And finally, of course, many of the main producers we had the opportunity to contact could be termed probably as enthusiasts or in some cases even evangelists who were in fact working sometimes against the institution. You know what I mean? It's simply trying to destroy the barriers that normal institutions usually have because it's in their business model to protect their intellectual assets. So this is really, in a way, was at that time, I have to say, really a problem, even at the individual level. Most of the time, what it also happens is in the OECD countries, users are also the main producers. So there is only one community which at the same time uses and produces those kind of resources. See, for example, to what extent the respondents to our survey said that they got some kind of support from the management of their institutions. You will see, for example, that when it comes to the production of open source software, the institution support was quite low. Same when it came to the production of content. Now, there are three main issues I would like to just simply to comment very briefly in view of the time. Taking mostly the perspective of higher education institutions in OECD countries. The first one is, what would OECD say about the issue of whether, because of OER, higher education institutions are going to lose students? Second one is, why institutions should engage, according to OECD, in this movement? And the third one, what are the main challenges, which in fact, are those already described? Do you think that your institutions are going to lose any registered students? Well, it's hard to say, but anyway, it's not happening yet. And it's not happening yet. So if you look at what we know, which is not really very much, you will see that the profile of OER users as learners, I'm not talking about academics who are reusing in a way, OER resources in order to produce new courses, but rather people who probably would like to, in a way, improve their level of knowledge in one particular area and go to these repositories. Well, as you will see from this data, most users are already well-educated people. So honestly, we cannot find any traces of say, new entrants trying to use heavily open educational resources. It seems to be a matter for which you need to have a well-developed taste for higher education, which is not always the case. Now, second point is that, as you know, in many OECD societies, what you buy when you go to a higher education institution is the diploma, in a way, the certificate, and this is really what counts. So either you have the OER connected to one accredited program or a certificate, or in fact, you are going to keep your market, your niche, in fact. The third point is that in many cases, you would, according to the data we have, what prospective university student is looking for is not really content, but rather institutional tutoring, and even more, the experience of being part of a community, which is called the university, and includes also opportunities not only in classrooms and libraries, but also in the cafeterias and the like, okay, and in grass. So I think that this is a third powerful reason why, higher education institutions are still going to keep their niche. And finally, because, in a way, we are probably posing this question not in the right terms, because many institutions are using OER for PR purposes. So in fact, they are marketing their institution because they are really active in the area of OER. And I could mention an increasing number of institutions doing that. Now, OECD developed a kind of a matrix regarding the main motivations declared by either governments, institutions, or individuals to produce or to be engaged or to support OER. I would like you to just to focus on some areas which I think are really promising and challenging. On the one hand, I think when it comes to institutions, in a number which is really relevant in Europe and probably less in other areas, it's important to see that OER can be matched with the ongoing discussion about what's the mission of the public service of higher education. A second point which is really important is that many managers in institutions do believe that engaging or having some kind of institutional support to OER in a way helps academics to engage in processes of internal improvement, particularly when it comes to teaching and learning processes. And the third idea, which I think is really, really interesting, is that, come on, if you have really good assets and you show them and you give them for free, probably many students will realize that if you have been able to produce that quality of content, come on, what kind of teachers, what kind of academics are you going to have? Probably the highest level worldwide. So I think this really, I don't have the time, of course, to run into each of these, but I think these are the three that are going probably to guide the public discussion about OER at institutional level in the 5 coming years. Now, I thought it was really interesting to bring in a different perspective, which is something that our colleagues at UNESCO did 1 year ago. They asked people coming from different institutions what were the main issues regarding OER. And in the end, in the final report, they were able, in a way, to compare what was said in developed countries as in comparison to developing countries. And I think it's really interesting to see that the 5 questions that were very high in the priority of developing countries, as you will see, are very much related to different aspects, which are really the core aspects of our discussions about the OER movement. For example, sustainability, for example, quality assurance, or the IPR issues, other than, for instance, the ability to really create and sustain communities and network internationally across institutions, across countries, sorry. But when it comes to developing countries, you will see that the problems are quite different. And in many cases, for example, the IPR issue comes very low in the priority, while access to technology is still the major issue. So I think this really poses us a big question. Politically, what's the role of governments in OECD countries when they realize that they are, in a way, they have tools to help to educational development in developing countries, but at the same time, they are, in a way, selling not only technology, which comes normally from developed countries, but also a particular way of understanding the role of education, and even sometimes a particular paradigm, especially in the areas related to social sciences. So this is really tricky. Now, what are the main challenges for the OER movement? And I'm going to finish with with that. One has already been mentioned, quality and relevance of resources. How can we, I mean, I'm talking, bearing in mind that my main customers are governments, how governments can really protect the rights of citizens and in a way